and welcome back to Book and Page. So we are on Chapter 8 of The Hobbit, Flies and Spiders, which every time I try and say it, I keep trying to say spiders and flies. Now, it's flies and spiders. And the flies don't really come into it, so guess what? Spiders do. Yay! Okay, so summary to begin. The group, now minus Gandalf, who has promptly headed off, it turns out, to handle the necromancer. The company's headed into Mirkwood. And guess what? It's already terrible. The forest is frightening. Very little sunlight gets through. Eventually no sunlight gets through. The path is weird and there's eyes in the dark. Especially the insect ones. Yay! Spiders. After crossing an enchanted stream, Bomber gets hit by a deer and falls in. They pull him out and he promptly falls asleep. And stays asleep for about 4 days until he finally wakes up again. So for those 4 days, everybody has to help carry him. So when he does wake up, he very happily tells them that he dreamed about the Wood King and his feasts and being part of them and really good food. And everybody's like, shut up, we are starving. Stop talking about it. And Bomber mourns not being able to go back to sleep because he's hungry. They do spot the Wood King's feasts. Lights show up. They decide that they're all going to leave the path, which they were told specifically not to do in order to try and get into the feast. They try 3 times and fail all 3. And Bilbo gets separated from the group. So Bilbo wanders around for a bit, decides he'll wait until he has a little better light during the day, because night is pitch black here. So he settles down with his back to a tree to try and get some sleep, and wakes up being attacked by a spider. Which he manages to kill. He does get free and kills the spider. And sort of thinks really hard in his head, and he's like, well, that probably makes sense. All the dwarves have probably been caught by spiders. And he correctly, in fact, even guesses which way he needs to go to help find them. And this is because he was born with an inordinate amount of luck. So he heads off, now having named his sword Sting, because this fly's got a sting to it, making it not a fly. Because flies do bite, but I've never met a fly that stings. So he correctly guesses the direction that he needs to go to find the dwarves, and it turns out, great, the spiders talk! Though the dwarves are likely alive, so using the ring, sting, and a few stones, Bilbo kills some spiders, leads the rest off, doubles back, frees the dwarves. They have a bit of a fight where Bilbo has to again disappear and draw them off. But eventually they escape. They end up back in one of the clearings where the Wood King's feast was happening. And the spiders don't like to go there. And Bilbo does eventually have to explain how he disappears. It's a magic ring. And everyone's like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yay, we got one of those. And a very luck-attracting hobbit. Perfect. We'll be fine. They decide they're gonna take a nap, and then Dwalin's like, oh my god, where's Thorin? He's literally the leader of this group, and it takes them that long that they're all lying down, and Dwalin's like, where's Thorin? Thorin's not there. It turns out, Tolkien tells us at the end of this chapter, turns out Thorin got hit with that enchanted sleep because he stepped into the feast the 3rd time around, hit the ground and stayed there for about 2 days. So the spiders missed him, Bilbo missed him, and the wood elves pick him up and trot him back to their king, wake him up, and then the king, who it turns out likes treasure, interrogates it. And all Thorin's willing to say is that I'm starving and my people were starving. And you're dicks. So, I mean, communication level A+, at the end of this chapter. Dwarves have finally noticed they're actually missing their leader, and Thorin and the Elf King, who isn't actually named in The Hobbit. He's named in the appendices. So I'll continue calling him the Wood King, or the King of the Wood Elves, rather than Thandril. Yeah, turns out he's treasure hungry and not willing to communicate with Thorin, and Thorin's treasure hungry and not willing to communicate with the Wood King. Whoops. Wouldn't you know? Yeah, so a bit of an adventure, stabby stab, still singing in our most desperate of times, in Mirkwood. And Mirkwood's terrifying. So, we've noticed that Mirkwood has a couple of dangers in it, some a little more dangerous than others, and in fact some that look less dangerous, and then it turns out probably more so. And I'm speaking, of course, about this weird enchanted sleep thing going on, which is a something that pops up not only with the river, but also for both Bilbo and Thorin when they step into the feast. They're both put to sleep. So why sleep? Why does your enchantment put us to sleep? Why not just kill us outright? Or shock us? Or set us on fire? Which, I mean, I'm not saying that's any better. But sleep is a bit of a weird thing here. And so it's something that we need to take a few pokes at. Recognizably, it is an effective method to be able to escape without being followed, because you know that your intruder or pursuer is, like, dead to the world. Like, just gone and out. But that's one of the least concerning aspects of this enchantment. So, obviously there's dreams that go along with this enchanted sleep that specifically seem to have to do with the Wood King and the Wood Elves themselves. Like, Bomber tells us that, yeah, he had dreams about the Wood King's feast, and all the wonderful food that he just doesn't get now. And that's actually, like, really twisted. Like, you dream about all these wonderful things that when you wake up, you realize you are deprived of them. Like, the Wood King isn't willing to bring people into his feasts, but he'll make people dream about them and then not help them. It's not like people have this nice dream about the Wood King's feast and a couple elves pick him up and, like, throw him out of the woods or something. Like, no, you're gonna wake back up in Mirkwood and everything's gonna be terrible. And now it's worse because you were given a taste of what could make it better and then told, but you can't have it. Like, that's... God, that's twisted. That's terrible, and it's cruel of the Wood Elves to do that, because you're more likely to cause utter despair or recklessness because of that. Like, seriously, did you think that was going to get people to leave your feasts alone? No, you're more likely to have more dwarves just booking it towards you guys because they're hungry, and anyone who's dreamed about these things wants it even more. Like, to not crave something and to be deprived of that thing is not a bad thing. Well, I didn't know I wanted that, and I can't have it. Here, it's steps worse. The dwarves want it because they're hungry, and they can't have it, but certain members of the company who have had this enchanted sleep, it's now despair-inducing. Because you gave it to me and then you took it away. Like, this isn't just we don't like strangers. It is we are active twits about it. Ugh. I don't much like the Wood Elves in this. Especially since it gets even worse than that. As we've seen, sleep in Mirkwood is very dangerous. They constantly have to set guards while they sleep because things are watching them, including the spiders. One time Bilbo doesn't have anybody watch his back when he falls asleep, he is attacked. All of the dwarves are attacked. Like, for the wood elves saying that they hate the giant spiders and show no mercy to them, they certainly make it easy for the spiders to eat other people that they don't like. The only person they pick up is Thorin from that initial encounter. They don't pick the rest of the dwarves up until much later. That's a dick move. They don't even pick Thorin up right away. Like, supposedly it's been like 2 days that he's been asleep. Why? Like, this enchanted sleep isn't the kind of thing these wood elves can do. It turns out it's actually very, very cruel and can get people killed. And the wood elves, for the most part, are just like, eh. And Tolkien's like, they're not terrible people. They don't starve Thorin or the other dwarves when they're in the dungeons. Yeah, but you're willing to starve them in the forest. And be real assholes about it. Perfect. You get none. Nothing for you, wood elves. Nothing for you. No. No. Nothing for the spiders either. Oh god, I have to agree with Ron Weasley on this one. Why did it have to be spiders? I'm just getting to the point where I can handle tiny, tiny spiders. And then these ones are just... Oh, they're such big spiders. Not the biggest in the series. The biggest is definitely Shelob. But as close as I can understand, Shelob's likely, like, the mother source of all of these spiders in Mirkwood. Huh. 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 So we've got gigantic spiders running around, which really makes another animal group that we're seeing here that have their own hierarchy and their own... Well, they're speaking to each other, so it's a question of what language they're speaking in. Common, maybe? It doesn't seem to be, it's never specified as their own language. Like, Bilbo understands it fully enough, so I suppose that would be common on that one. But it's a little weird because we don't get a moral designation on this group. Like, they're not designated as a part of the species, but a little different. Like, the wargs are defined as evil wolves, which is to say not all wolves are evil. Just the wargs are. Same with eagles. Eagles can be unkind creatures, but this particular group of them's really noble-hearted. We don't get that with the spiders, not directly. So we gotta do some inference, which is to say that they're still normal-sized spiders. Bilbo meets some normal-sized spiders when he climbs up to the canopy. And they're trying to catch these black emperor butterflies. So, I mean... We can infer there is some difference. In fact, the elves, they're specified as hating the giant spiders, so they're not just crushing all the tiny spiders they can find, though they might do that too. It's specifically the giant spiders, but that's not a moral designation. It might be that it's just all giant spiders are terrible and evil. But we don't know that. We don't know if there's any giant spiders who actually don't eat elves and wandering dwarves and don't torture their prey. Like, we're never introduced to that, so we sort of have to make the assumption probably not. Especially since the wood elves apparently really dislike the giant spiders. But we can say that an indictment of the giant spiders is not an indictment of all spiders, because we do have some normal-sized spiders that are just up in the canopy of the trees, not trying to kill any of our people, just trying to survive on butterflies. Still with the eating, I'm not a spider fan. I know there's probably people out there who are spider fans. I am not a spider fan. Especially if they get as big as me. But interestingly, the giant spiders aren't very strong individually. Despite their size, and the menace they sort of have, they're not noted as being like undefeatable individually. They work better as a collective group, and that's often how we see them operate. But in fact, there are a couple that seem to have very individualistic ideas. The first one that Bilbo meets when he's freeing the dwarves, that he hits with a stone, is the one that attacks Bombur, and Bombur kicks him, and all the other spiders laugh at this one guy. And then later, when Bilbo doubles back, he also meets a guard who's decided, I'm just going to eat while everybody else is gone. Like, they have individual thoughts, but they're stronger as a collective. Like I said, Bilbo kills at least two with just a single stone each. Which is to say, if you have some really good aim, if you're facing just one of them, you should be fine. If you're facing at least 50, that's the larger number we get. But he says at least 50. When at least 50 had come towards Bilbo, he moved. So they can work together. But Bilbo is capable of killing several of these spiders on his own, which we've never gotten from Bilbo before. So when it comes to a one-on-one fight, Bilbo's ready to go, and in fact, Bilbo's usefulness in that is even better because he can even subvert their strengths. Like, he's well aware that they work together well and they can trap people, and he figures out how to get away, where he has to go, how he has to move, all of that really quickly in a absolute moment where I think me, again, as a not fan of spiders, would just be screaming at absolute terror at these spiders, rather than effectively making up a song on the spot to enrage the spiders, and then escaping them, and then helping the dwarves to escape, and then getting cornered again, and then becoming invisible and going on singing the song that you just made. Like, I don't know how Bilbo does this. I don't know how he stays so calm in order to do this. Like, he's just, okay, this is, we gotta survive, let's do this. Bilbo really steps up here in really resourceful ways. So, the Wood Elves get nothing and the spiders get nothing, but Bilbo gets 2 more for you, Bilbo. I really wish I was keeping track of all this. Just have a point system for these characters. Guess what? Bilbo is winning. I don't like much anybody else in this book at my age anymore. Yeah, so let's go back to the Wood Elves. We finally meet the Wood Elves really seriously at the end of this chapter, and Tolkien tells us that the Wood Elves never actually went west and then came back. Which is a little weird thing. It's definitely something you need to know more about the lore to really understand, which is why I think it's just sort of shoved in there. But the idea is that there's land west of the sea that belongs to the gods, and the elves, at least certain groups of elves, existed in the west. And apparently were, again, created here, went west, learned from the gods, it also got twisted by some of them, like, again, not all elves are good, and basically a bunch of them got expelled back east, which is why we then have the elven groups here. And we're told that the Wood Elves here, under the Wood King, didn't go west, which made them more dangerous and less wise, because they didn't learn the lessons that all the other elven groups learned from all the terrible things that, most notably, the Silmarillion covers a lot of what happened in the West. They weren't part of that. They didn't learn any lessons there, so they stayed in the East, and it's reflective of that. And reading that, I hadn't realized it for a long time, hadn't picked it up, again, because you tend to ignore things that you don't understand fully. So I didn't understand this, and I understand it now. So, interestingly enough, I just want to mention this quickly. It does explain 2 things that have always bugged me about the Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings overall has several rings. So, 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for men, and the one ring that rules them all. And the 9 kings have all passed away and were buried with their rings. The 7 dwarf rings, for the most part, are lost, and apparently in the belly of dragons. The 3 elven rings, though, are present. They were the only ones not corrupted by Sauron and the One Ring. And the 3 are owned by Galadriel, who you meet in Lord of the Rings, Elrond, who you meet in both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and then, oddly enough, a elf that you only meet at the end of the Lord of the Rings, who is actually the shipbuilder, who builds the elven ships to sail back west to that land of the gods. Which is weird because there's 3 main kingdoms of elves. Elrond rules one in Rivendell, Galadriel and her husband Celeborn rule another in Lothlorien, and then there's the Wood Elves under the Wood King here, Thandril, in Mirkwood. Why does he not get a ring? Well, this explains it. He never went west. His group never went west. So the rulers of the Wood Elves wouldn't get one of the rings. It also explains, in the appendices, it turns out, the Wood King and Celeborn do not go west at the end of the Lord of the Rings. The 3 elves, well, the 2 elves owning rings, and the shipbuilder gives his ring to Gandalf, so all 3 rings sail west at the same time, but the Wood King stays behind. Because he doesn't have an interest in going west, he's never been there. So that was nice to have explained, but doesn't have anything really to do with this story. Except again, he never learned the lessons, which is don't get greedy and be willing to let things go. Because we actually get... Let's read a bit of a passage here that tells us a bit about the Wood Elves and their king in general. Okay. If the Elf King had a weakness, it was for treasure. Where have we heard that before? A couple places. None of them good. Especially for silver and white gems. And though his hoard was rich, he was ever eager for more. Since he had not yet as great a treasure as other elf lords of old. See, that's the haven't learned the lessons, which says, hoarding treasure is never good. Didn't learn them for not having been west, didn't learn them from, oh, I don't know, the dwarves that were attacked by a dragon. And then this lovely little note, his people neither mined nor worked metals or jewels, nor did they bother much with trade or with tilling the earth. Cool, so what do you guys do? Feast and hoard a lot of treasure? Let's take a bit of a skip back here. We're gonna find another little point that, undoubtedly that was what brought the dragon. Dragons steal gold and jewels, you know, from men and elves and dwarves, wherever they can find them, and they guard their plunder as long as they live, which is practically forever unless they're killed, and never enjoy a brass ring of it. Indeed, they hardly know a good bit of work from a bad, though they usually have a good notion of a current market value, and they can't make things for themselves. The Wood Elves are dragons. Like, they're in a different form, but they're basically the same thing. But we got a king who likes treasure. He has particular ones he likes, and he constantly wants to grow his hoard, because he doesn't have enough as other people have had. And it turns out his people don't make anything. Or do anything. That's not good. If you act like a dragon, you're going to become draconic in your actions. Like, it's just going to be a bad cycle. Which might explain why they're such dicks. They have their own focus, and if no one fits into it, well then I'll just keep them in my, keep them in prison until they tell me about more gold that I want to own. Like, oh god, the Wood Elves are dragons. That's not good. That's not good. That is not good. But in fact, We will see some redemption for them. They do have heartstrings to pluck, it's just not for dwarves. Because this is going to be something we see really well in 2 more chapters, which is the greedy don't like the greedy. Because you always want more for yourself, and that means taking it from others. So if other people are showing their greed to you, it makes you mad. So dwarves and the wood elves are not communicating because they both want treasure. And poor Bilbo just wants some good food and not to die. Again, let's be Bilbo in this case. Let us be Bilbo. Let's not be spiders. Let's not be wood elves. Let's especially not be the king of wood elves, who is very much like Smaug the dragon. Yay. Haven't seen him much yet. It's a few more chapters before we get there. We gotta get out of Mirkwood first. Never thought elves would be the enemy. But Bilbo's got a plan, eventually. Eventually Bilbo will have a plan. So I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.